Idealism versus realism is a debate that has been going on since ages. Both philosophical theories have their pros and cons, and here, we have tried to discuss both these philosophies in detail. Philosophers say the key to understanding human life is answering the really big questions. Why are we here? Where did we come from? Where will we go? And so on and so forth. This has truly been a debate for the ages, one that has galvanized thinkers, philosophers, theologians and scientists for thousands of years, giving rise to the schools of thoughts of idealism and realism, two heavyweights in the realm of philosophy. Yet the dawn of the modern age, by which I mean, the nuclear space-cyberspace triad, or what Toffler refers to, much more fashionably, as the post-industrial, information-driven third wave of human civilization, has given these ancient philosophical doctrines a dose of pragmatism. It has also let the realists walk happily to the bank, but more on that later. Index Idealism, Philosophy and Proponents Realism, Philosophy and Proponents Idealism versus Realism. Idealism, Philosophy and Proponents. All the choir of heaven and furniture of earth, in a word, all those bodies which compose the frame of the world, have not any subsistence without a mind. George Berkeley. All our knowledge begins with the senses, proceeds then to the understanding, and ends with reason. There is nothing higher than reason. Immanuel Kant. Idealism puts forth the argument that reality, as we perceive it, is a mental construct. That its experience is due to the sensory abilities of the human mind and not because reality exists in itself, as an independent entity. In the epistemological sense, this means that one cannot know the existence of things beyond the realm of the intellect. Plato first attempted to define reality in his theory of forms, what he termed the actual substance of things, which formed matter and perceptible reality. Yet, Plato teaches that matter is real and can be experienced as a rational living entity. It is not a mere projection of consciousness. Philosophical ideas that place the metaphysical realm above and beyond that of the physical one have been around since ancient times. Hindu Vedanta and Buddhist doctrine have idealist leanings in their proposition of Maya, the illusory nature of this world, and Brahman, the human soul finding its way through life and to divinity, following the path of righteousness and moral propriety. The early Greek philosophers, termed Neoplatonists, after their affinity for deducing the teachings of Plato and forming them into mystical ideas, also have a similar philosophical standpoint. One of its leading lights was Plotinus, whose teachings about the One, the intellect and the soul shaped the progression of metaphysical theories between the 2nd and the 8th centuries AD. Idealism in the modern world owes its development to philosophers such as George Berkeley, who was possibly its greatest proponent, and the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. Yet, these two thinkers interpreted idealism in very different ways. Kant described his brand of idealism as transcendent, whereas Berkeley called it immaterialism, which we today refer to as subjective materialism. George Berkeley was of the opinion that the material world exists because there is a mind to perceive it, and that things which are not within the conceptual framework of the human mind cannot be deemed real. He does not deny that objects exist, but that their existence on the physical realm is as long as there is a mind to perceive them. He summarized this in a famous Latin phrase, esse est percipi, to be is to be perceived. Immanuel Kant built his philosophical arguments as a refutation to David Hume and his theory of skepticism, that men cannot perceive causality as we only rely on experience to guide us in life. Kant proposed a philosophy where he said that reality exists independently of human minds, but its knowledge is inherently unknowable to man because of sensory filters in our consciousness. These filters hamper our ability to see the thing in itself, the ding and sick, and thus our ultimate perception of things is always through the mind's fixed frame of reference. Back to Index. Realism, Philosophy and Proponents. We can evade reality, but we cannot evade the consequences of evading reality. Ayn Rand. Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. Philip K. Dick. In the philosophical sense, Realism postulates that reality exists in independence with human perception and is not dependent on observers to define its objective boundaries. To understand philosophical realism, we must again turn to that giant of ancient philosophy and the father of the modern one, Plato. It may be confusing, but his theory of forms, sometimes also referred to as Platonic idealism, is the basis for realism, since it attempts to define the universal forms or simply universals. A universal is the singular property of an object or thing which can exist simultaneously in two places in the same space-time continuum. This can be explained by the property of color, such as blue. The blueness of an object exists independently of the object itself in different locations. This is the problem of universals. How does one understand these forms? Plato thought they existed in a plane which did not come in direct contact with ours, we cannot feel or touch them, and that the laws of space-time did not apply to universals, yet they exist, and by a natural or non-mental conception also provide structure to reality itself. Modern realism has various forms such as scientific, socio-political, aesthetic, epistemological and moral realism. It follows the general rejection of philosophical idealism and the acceptance of reality as independent of human perception. Aristotle is considered to be the foremost proponent of realism and, as Plato's student, had his philosophical beginnings rooted in Platonic idealism, yet developed his own theories regarding the nature of reality later on. Aristotelian realism proposes that ideas can free-float without having matter, whereas matter cannot exist without some semblance of form, and this form is independent of mental cognizance. Religious realism was put forth by Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century, stating that true reasoning lies with the supreme reasoner, God, and that by aligning our rational reasoning minds with his tenets, we too can understand the universe and the nature of reality. In more modern times, philosophers such as Francis Bacon, John Locke and later G. E. Moore and Ayn Rand forwarded theories relating to moral realism. Whereas German theoreticians like Otto von Bismarck and Karl von Clausewitz were proponents of political realism.